Welcome to NCSF. This was a third webinar, and I'm solo. I'm mostly hosting different mostly language cafes, and near future maybe meet and greet. And NCSS mission is to bring out Finnish startup companies, businesses, and if they're interested to have a business in China or Asia overall, and find for them investors. That's the quick sum up. And for today, we have two speakers, as Maria's told that our second speaker was Heikki Ranta will be coming later on for personal reasons. So today we have Pia Kuosmanen, Senior Advisor of Mingle Advisors, and she will bring out her own personal experience and point of view about explaining business in China. And what else? So basically, stage is yours, Pia. Just introduce yourself, your mission, and your everything what you want to share.
Cool, thanks, Sulo, and thanks for the opportunity. Just a quick question, since I know Heikki is going to be late. Do you still want me to stick to the 10 minutes that we agreed on earlier? Can be longer. I'll try to get to the interactive bit as soon as we can, because I think it's also, I see we have some people online, and I'm actually really curious about like what your interest in China and whether you have experience, and if you have questions or something you wish to discuss. I think that's the more interesting bit, but I'm going to give you some food for thought first and take it from there. So you guys, nice to meet you. My name is Pia Kuosmanen. That's a Finnish name, you probably realize. 用中文我叫郭碧雅. So I also have a Chinese name, 郭碧雅, that was given to me by our first local team in Beijing when we were establishing the Slush startup event operations there for the first time. And we're going to discuss how important it is to have a local name and how important it is to have some idea of the environment you work in when you're working with China and the Chinese. Otherwise, my background, I have already worked with Chinese organizations for the first time in 2013, when I was the head of our student union at Aalto University, and we had a long-standing collaboration with Tsinghua University in Beijing and a few other organizations there. Did my first visit to China in 2014, Beijing and Shanghai for a few weeks, saw everything that was going on, was pretty impressed, shocked, afraid, confused, and interested at the same time. When you come from a country like Finland, which is a fairly small, well-established society, going to a place like China is a big change in every conceivable way. I'm going to talk more about that as well. Then after that, for a few years, I lived first in Beijing, then in Shanghai to establish Slush operations, was in the core team and the head of operations for two major Slush events there. Continued to advise a little bit afterwards. I was also heading Suomi 100 Finland 100 project on co-innovation between Finland and China in 2017. And ever since then, I've been working on and off with different kinds of Chinese projects or advising companies or people who wish to do stuff. And now for the last 7 or 8 months, I've been working more closely with Mingle Advisors, which is founded by my ex-colleague, Lauri Tangming, who lives currently also in Hangzhou, which is the headquarters city of Alibaba. It's about an hour by train from Shanghai. And he's the CEO, he's my CEO at Mingle Advisors. Most of the team is working locally in China. We are now 13 people. And we have 2 people here currently permanently established in Helsinki. That's me and my colleague, Sun. So that's us. We work with over 120 organizations over the last 5 years, help them out with the Chinese market. That's my intro. So then let's get to the actual stuff, right? If you have questions, maybe you can use the chat to already sort of share those questions, and we'll get to them as we go along. You can start using the chat by letting me know, first of all, have you been to China? Maybe a thumbs up if you have on the chat, so I can see who we have, what your experience is. So for those of you who are now just joining, I'm asking you to put a thumbs up on the chat if you've been to China before. Also, it's good to know. Yeah, Maria, you have been. That's good. I figured that might be the case. So I got a few things. I didn't make a PowerPoint slide because I feel like we're already discussing through a screen. So I'm going to just show you a few things. Does it show? It doesn't work. Okay, with the screen? No. Okay, I'll give you a number. Chinese civilization is over 5,000 years old. And this is the first thing you gotta sort of wrap your head around. Now, if you're like me growing up in Europe, the worldview that you get is very Europe-centric and Western-centric as well throughout your education. And history is also told from the perspective of European and American development, mostly. What we don't take into account often is that when we were still, learning how to farm here, the Chinese already had an extensive civilization happening in the East. And many of the key features of Chinese culture, and remember, this is from my perspective, what I have learned. And of course, there are as many points of view as there are people who have visited China, because it's a complex and big country. But the Chinese civilization is still a central part of how Chinese people approach life, how they approach business, how they approach conflict, how they approach social relations, and how they also approach their relationship with people like me, Western people. From their perspective, they've been around, they've been civilized for thousands of years. And just the fact that in the last few hundred years, there's been a period of time where global power has been mostly concentrated in the West with the US and so on, doesn't mean that they don't think still that the Chinese civilization is going to prevail. And they don't necessarily think that they see it as a sort of a worldview, how we approach world in the West. And they see their civilization having endured throughout revolutions and emperors and invasions and whatever for 5,000 years. So there's got to be something there that works. And this is what, the more you understand of this mentality, the more it will help you to also understand that just because I think these things are obvious and this is the way things should work and this is how we think and this is universal, that's not necessarily the case. And to be open and accepting about different approaches to life and relationships. I'll give you a few examples. For example, the work-life balance is something that is discussed a lot, and stress is discussed a lot in the West at the moment. And if you're like me in Finland, you learn first to separate your personal life and your professional life very differently. But when you go to China, it's 24/7 and you speak with the same people outside and inside of the office. If you go to a meeting, one of the classic mistakes to do is that you go to China, you meet with someone for 2 hours, you have your high-level meeting, you sit on different sides of the table, you exchange, pleasantries, you have a conversation, and then you leave. And then you think, okay, now business is moving forward. What you don't understand is that they don't know who you are. You're in China for the first time. You don't have any friends. How can we know we can trust you? They might not even know the organization you represent, even if it's a relatively big organization. A friend of mine got a question saying, like, you say Credit Suisse is backing your project? Who are they? Never heard of them, which is one of the major Western banks. What you do is you create a personal relationship with these guys. You go out for dinner with them. You make sure that you get to know them. You give them reasons to trust you and to like you and to understand how you think. And that's how you move forward. And this is something that is called guanxi, the trust, the network of trust that you need to establish, and you need to show them why you are someone that should be in their network of trust as well, by being valuable and helpful and relevant to them. Another thing that I wanted to mention to you is that, again, maybe you can indicate in the chat, are you familiar with WeChat, Weixin? I see some nods from the people with the video. Has anybody else ever heard about WeChat? Write it in the chat if you have. I see a thumb, excellent. Harry is a pro over here. He's been working in China much more extensively than I have, honestly. Maybe you should be doing this. Okay, and you guys know of it, right? WeChat is really an example that the whole ecosystem of communication, social media apps, office apps, the logic of how it's used in China is completely different. You know, if you have, you have your Google Docs for your company and your Gmail, and then you use LinkedIn to talk to your professional partners or contracts or whatever. You maybe use WhatsApp to talk to your friends and family. And then you go to China and none of these things will work. Not only that, nobody there uses them. And when I say they don't work, is you're familiar with the Great Chinese Firewall. It's actually a thing. Install your VPN before you go to China, but also be prepared for the fact that people use different kinds of apps and they communicate with you 24/7, all the time. China is a great place to get a burnout if you don't manage yourself very well. And the pace of communication is much faster. In the West, you can expect an answer to a big question within the week, maybe. But in China, you expect it immediately, in the next few hours, maybe in the next day, at the very latest. And if nothing comes back from you in that time to your Chinese partners, they're going to come and ask again. But if you still can't deliver, they're going to think you're not invested in the relationship, and they're maybe going to find another opportunity that's available to them and that's responsive to them at the time. And that's something that got me into a hot mess a few times because I didn't realize that was the case. So use the local apps, learn how people use them, manage your time, and be responsive. Above all, be responsive, because Chinese people, I feel one of their greatest strengths is that they're very opportunistic and very flexible and dynamic. When they see an opportunity, they want to get it done instantly. Tomorrow might be a different day, Things change so fast that tomorrow the opportunity might not be there anymore. Something else comes up, policy changes, whatever. So seize it when you have the chance. And that's how they operate, I feel. So you need to be quick and flexible with them. So first lesson, 5,000 years of civilization. Get to know it. Second lesson, WeChat, local apps, communication methods. Learn how they work, use them as efficiently as you can. Third lesson, most of you guys have heard of Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, as it's also the great Chinese philosopher on warfare. The Art of War is the most well-known piece of work by him. And you're probably wondering why I'm talking about a guide to warfare when it comes to a business thing, but I think the two are very closely related. One of the key tenets of Sun Tzu's writing is that always attack indirectly and avoid direct confrontation. And this shows in everything. In business negotiations, no one will ever tell you directly, no. No one will ever confront you necessarily directly if there are issues. But there are signs. You start to detect signs. Somebody from your stakeholders maybe reaches out to you. Hey, I had a conversation and they were asking these things. Is everything all right? Or a partner you've been having negotiations with suddenly goes quiet for a while, or if somebody pulls funding from you all of a sudden, then you start to realize that something is happening in the background. And what you need to do to be good at negotiating or doing business with the Chinese is to read the signs and read the terrain and to understand, deduce. And this is really hard for me because Finnish culture is very direct, and we usually say things as we think of them and provide direct feedback and have open conversations. In China, I could never have an open conversation with my local team. I always had to go to them individually and have a conversation with them individually to make sure they don't lose face, another key concept. Or I don't lose face, because as a manager, if they criticize me openly, I lose face and it's embarrassing for everybody. The same thing in the relationship with a business partner might happen. They don't want to embarrass you. So they want to find a way to make you understand that something needs to change. And this is what I recommend for you. If you start to establish an operation with Chinese people in China, find someone who has taken these lessons and understands how to read the signs. I know it sounds like some esoteric science, but it's very true. And we had some lessons on that when building Slush, because we nearly lost the event the day before because we didn't read the signs with the local authorities well enough. Even if we had local organizers on the team, we didn't lose the event because we had some good backers that were able to convince them that these people know what they're doing. Maybe after 6 years, it's okay to finally tell this. And these things will always happen to you when you're in China. And then a final thing, I think in China, the mentality that I learned there is that everything is possible. Everything is possible, but everything is also difficult. So what does that mean? If you're Finnish like me, Finland is not a country, it's a club. You know, you work in a professional field for a while, you get to know everybody who's relevant. You understand who does what, you understand who decides on what. You have not too many levels of hierarchy between you and the prime minister, probably, honestly. 2 or 3 levels of separation at the most. So everything's sort of straightforward. But in China, the scale is massive. In 15 years, they've moved 250 million people out of poverty. They built cities in a few weeks' time. Things happen at such a massive scale that nobody knows what's going on most of the time. Everybody's just winging it super hard. But that also means that there's so much opportunity and possibility. It's hard to not to get distracted. You need to be very focused when you work in China on a project, because opportunities will come left and right. The difficulty is evaluating whether they're real opportunities, whether they're the right people to want to work with. But if you want to get something done at scale, if you want to find funding, if you want to do whatever crazy project, first of all, probably somebody already is doing it in China. And second of all, it's probably possible to do there. But you have to be prepared for a really long process to make it really happen. You have to do your groundwork. It's taken the Slush organization 5 years to really become established in China. And that's just the time period you got to prepare for. And you got to prepare for an investment of your time and effort. So it's an ultra competitive market, very cutthroat. And if you fail, your Chinese partner is going to have 10,000 people queuing in line for the same opportunity. You're going to have a lot of competition. So you got to be ready. But still, it's exciting, you know, and that's why I like working with China, because I see a lot of the things of the future of the planet being decided there. I see the energy and the excitement and the action and the sheer scale of stuff And I also think that we still here in Western countries lack the understanding we are going to need in the coming decades when power starts to shift. And I think we need to educate ourselves and build understanding about China and the Chinese in order to have a balanced relationship with them as well. So that's my thing. I'm going to give you a run through. So first of all, 5,000 years of civilization. 2, WeChat and other communication stuff, super important. 3, art of war. Take a look. Indirect and strategic. They bide their time. They only strike when the opportunity is there. I'm sorry, I'm using military terms. It's really crazy. And for everything's possible, but everything's difficult. And that's my presentation. So now I'll be really happy to have a chat. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you for magnificent speech. And any question, you can either speak out loud or using your mic or from the chat. Any question for our speaker?
Well, I can ask a question. So, what, in your opinion, what is the greatest advantage of Finnish companies in Chinese market? What is the advantage? How can they sell? How do they differ from other competitor? Sorry, competitors.
It's Friday. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. I have now been working with a very large. There are a couple of things I'm going to bring up. First one is I've been working with a few very large companies that do logistics, and they bring international brands to the Chinese market. And one of the things, not just the Finnish market, also the Nordics, one of the things that they keep mentioning is that it's fairly exotic, fairly clean, fairly, it's nature, it's forest, it's clean waters, it's exotic, it's remote, it's safe, it's innovative. And this mental idea makes it, gives a slight competitive edge to good brands from the Finnish and the Nordic markets in the eyes of the Chinese consumer, if you do it right, because most of the stuff you can imagine is already available in the Chinese market. You just go into Taobao, like one of the online mobile app platforms, and you can buy anything delivered to your home the next day. But so you have your Korean cosmetics, and you have your American stuff, and you have African ethnic products, but not a lot of Nordic stuff yet. So that's one. If you're a product company in Finland, there's an opportunity for you there. The second angle is obviously the fact that for some reason, the majority of European unicorns come from Finland and the Nordics. My background is in startups and in technology, and we still have the capability of creating innovative solutions that could make an impact in the Chinese market. I think the challenge is not so much having great products or having great innovative technologies. It's the challenge of entering a market that acts on in a different logic than any other market in the world. So if you come from Finland, you're probably good with, or people will maybe also respect things like education, smart technologies, clean energy, nature, Lapland, reindeer, stuff like that. And finally, the third thing is that in China, everything is important, but politics is especially important. And the Finnish people have a long-standing diplomatic and good relations with China on multiple levels. A lot of cities have friendship cities. So if you're from Pori, or if you're from Lappeenranta, or if you're from Oulu, all of these cities will have a friend city in China, and they can give you a hand. But also on a national level, it's a long-standing collaboration, and that means that Finnish people in general have a good neutral reputation. Nobody hates us, and that helps. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Nice.
Can I ask another question, please?
All right.
It's Kai. Yes.
Hi, Kai.
Hello. Great cultural prospects, Pila. I really enjoyed the summary. I totally agree with all the points, especially on the immediate response and WeChat. Now, my question is on how do you navigate the tricky issues, because it does pop up, because obviously I'm in UK, so I have to deal with obviously the opportunity in mainland China, and I also need to deal with the interesting opportunity in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So often I come into the kind of like subtle challenge in terms of people would query your political stand, and you do need to handle that really, really carefully, because you know the any conversation, any position you take can be leaked to some other sources, and that can put you in a slightly tricky position. So, what is your experience on that, and any advice or any lessons?
Yeah. I just to specify, do you feel that you need to explain your ideas to people in the UK or in China, or both?
No. Actually, it's I don't have to explain to people in UK. Interestingly, I'm soon going to be involved with the UK's National Committee on China, where we're going to have a lot of internal debate about this, and but hopefully we'll keep it civilized. But I need to deal with Taiwanese collaborators, and mainland China collaborator, Hong Kong collaborator, and of course other collaborators in Southeast Asia, where their political affiliation is quite often deliberately hidden. So the question is actually, when you deal with other people, you be conversation. Now, especially the dodgy thing is actually online conversation, because online conversation sometimes can be recorded, and it can be can be replayed. I mean, if you have offline meeting, obviously it's a lot more private, so that's easier to handle. But online, I mean, yeah. So it's when you face the external conversations, how do you make sure that you handle this sensibly and obviously diplomatically to the occasion, but also in dealing with the risk of kind of like the after event replays.
This is a really good and topical and current question, and as we all probably have seen, that I think the interest in China and the rising influence of China globally has become a much more discussed topics in the last 2 to 3 years, I think. And I think it's a natural reaction to the rising influence of Chinese economy and their extended influence globally in different places. I did some project work some years back in Eastern Africa, and I see a lot of Chinese construction taking place, and Chinese building schools and roads and so on. So I think now it's also an internal reflection for us in the West to recalibrate our idea of the world, and that's very challenging. I don't think I have a solution for you, honestly, but I have had to also have these kinds of conversations where, you might be dealing with customers in Europe who have a political affiliation or have political oversight, for example, and we know that the stance on things like human rights or political points of view, they vary between China and Europe, for example, quite strongly on some things, and there is no solution for that. I, at the moment, mostly approach it with very practically. I think operating in China, just due to the way the country moves forward so fast, and the fact that you will always be a foreigner, which means that you will never have the same kind of guanxi or embeddedness or relations or security in operating in China as the locals do. This will never happen. So you have to, like, from the get-go, accept that there's a risk of essentially losing things overnight if something goes wrong. that will always be present. No matter how established you are, it might happen to you. And this is a risk you have to accept. I think there are ways to mitigate that risk. I believe that in the end, if you are able to establish successful business where both sides don't feel too uncomfortable with the compromises they need to make, you're also able to create shared understanding and connections between people. And I think that always improves the overall situation as well, because you get to talk to people about things, you create trust with them, and then you can also address, and I'm not saying, lecture, because I don't think we in the West can really lecture at anyone about anything, and certainly don't do it with the Chinese, because that doesn't land well at all. I've seen it happen. Don't ever do it. But if you have a good trusting relationship with working with someone or some organization for several years, you create a rapport where you navigate these things together. I've also had situations where politically directed organizations have felt uncomfortable doing anything with China because of their constituents or because of the public conversation. And I think then my role is often to accept that, but also to explain that the way I see it is it's always better to maintain collaboration than not, even when you disagree on things. Because I think if you cut off the Chinese, if you don't hear their point of view, if you're not ready to have a dialogue, no matter how difficult it is, it's going to be worse for everybody. So, I don't know, Kai. It's tough. I usually try to translate how I see the Chinese are thinking to Westerners, and I try to explain how Westerners think about things to the Chinese. I find myself doing this often. Do you have a comment?
I totally agree with you that it is quite tricky. I think it's a lot easier to handle the communication with Hong Kong now, because the business part of Hong Kong is super pragmatic.
That's
and
true.
they don't really want to confront you on that on this kind of issue. But Taiwan is really quite tricky. I found it's because the opinion about Taiwanese individuals and people, especially when you meet them offline, is that they're actually really one-sided. And I look at the situation with a sense of desperation. Of course, I speak with a mainland Chinese accent and instant, but I have to repeatedly remind them I'm British. So that makes things improving. It makes things easier. But of course, I mean, I cannot call them a country at all. Right? I mean, because I'm dealing with a lot of very important Chinese partner, but while a lot of Taiwanese people, they see themselves as a country, and that's really, really sensitive. And I do find that quite tricky. So I didn't ask this question expect a perfect answer at all. I mean, don't worry. It's it's good to have that sense of recognition. And let's move on to other easier questions. There are lots of easier. It's Friday. Let's not stress ourselves.
Yes, from Leonardo has a question. To what extent are written contacts reliable when doing business with or in China? And how is it decided which country law will apply from your experience? Or contract, correction.
Yeah, boy, this is also a good question. I have a philosophical answer, and then I have a technical answer for you. I'm obviously not a lawyer, so the technical is not going to be that technical. I'm going to talk about my experience. The philosophical point of view is that you have to account for the difference in how the Chinese approach relationships with you. In my experience, if you land a written contract, you have an American and a Chinese person who do a written contract. The American person is going to walk away thinking, okay, this is going to happen. This is what we're going to do in the next months. This is now binding. We're going to execute all of this, and they're going to execute all of that, and we're good. It's done, right? The Chinese person is going to walk away thinking, okay, we have now started a collaboration, and we have expressed mutually the willingness to work together, and we will see how it goes. This is a good starting point, and we will have to constantly negotiate again to see that our opportunities are aligned. And that alone creates like massive challenges if you're not aware of it. The written contract really is the starting point. It can, from the Chinese perspective, you know, the situation and the circumstances change on a daily basis. And in Chinese culture, it's wisdom to be aware of your surroundings and to react to the changes in your surroundings. And this applies to everything, and it also applies to your business arrangements and contracts. And they will come to you to renegotiate some of the things. They will ask you to change it multiple times over the course of your partnership. If you have options how to react to them wanting to sort of get to know you and establish a long-standing relationship. And a part of that process is renegotiating and sort of realigning your mutual interest constantly. That creates trust because they see you being, instead of you saying, no, we have an agreement, we're not going to change it, we already did this, which will convince them that you're inflexible, you're unaware of your surroundings, and you're probably not going to have a future together. The smarter thing to do is to find a way to somehow accommodate that. So if you can't always grant what they're looking for directly, find a way to not say no, find a way to say yes to something. And in the process of doing that, you can also do the same, by the way, to them. They will be very accommodating to that. So if you want to change something, they will work very hard to accommodate you because they're still committed to the long-standing relationship with you. It's only at like a very desperate moment when everything has been tried and nothing is working and they're ready to leave, that's the moment when they say no to you, but only then. And everything else has been tried before that. So the contract is going to change. We had a lot of contracts at Slush, and we you know, I was inexperienced at the time, and I really thought that, you know, this is going to tell us how things are going to work. But we very quickly learned that even the day before the event, you're still going to have to renegotiate something with the security company or with someone else because the situation has changed. And if you manage that, they're going to see you're committed. They're going to see you're flexible. They think that you can maybe survive in China. And they have learned to work with you and they understand how you work. So then you have already established a better relationship with them. So yeah, maybe Harry is saying maybe has the same effect as saying no. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because that's an interesting comment. It may be true.
Seems like no. And from Kai, there's another question. So have you find the cases where businesses have been asked to form joint venture with different Chinese company in order to do business in different provinces?
I have one more thing to add to the contract thing before we go into this one, the technical bit. So I'm not an expert, but have legal help that's familiar with operating in China if you can afford it. You don't have to go as far as telling your partner you have legal help. You don't necessarily have to, you know, even go to the point of like considering litigation. Usually they'll just be able to tell you when you're about to do something that will really get you into trouble. So if your Chinese partner asks you to be responsible for something, for example, that you can't possibly be responsible for, or you're entering into a financial agreement that involves partners you haven't been able to vet, or something like that, avoid those kinds of things and have legal counsel telling you that, okay, if you commit to this, then you might be screwed because local governments will come for you instead of these people and so on. So have someone advise you on that.
Thank you very much for your answer. It was exactly what I was looking for.
All right, nice. And then for the...
I'm trying to ask an easier question, you see, because I found that the earlier question was a little bit
This
too
is easier? It's a little bit easier.
Have you found, because I found myself in cases where businesses have been asked to form JV with different Chinese companies in order to do business in different provinces, because there are a lot of internal competition between different provinces, the major cities in China.
Yeah.
So obviously it does mean short-term or possibly medium-term benefit, but JVs or exclusive relationship does have constraint. It's easier to kind of respect that constraint offline for the kind of like for physical product offline for offline channels. But today's business is actually very online and online or the best online and offline. So wonder what your advice on that and what you experience. Is easier, definitely.
Yeah, not easy, but easier. If you are a company that's looking to, for example, land in the Chinese market, often you need to find a local partner. That's the background. You need to find a local partner who already has maybe the kinds of operations or partnerships or distribution networks locally that will enable you to do business. And usually they probably are looking for a joint venture where you establish a company locally in China in a location that they would prefer. Especially if you deal with local governments, you're going to find that they want you to establish your company in a local science park, for example, or tech park,
They always.
This is very typical. This is very, very
you
typical.
Have to be here. You have to be committed in order to support you. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have, they tell you that you need to have an office here. You need to have at least one permanent staff here. You need to be committed to running your operations here for the next 3 to 5 years. But they also usually they bind that up with a promise of a certain kind of investment, a certain kind of support in finding business partners. And that does also lend you the credibility of the local government, which actually in China helps a lot, because instantly people will be willing to work with you because you have the government support already. Without the government support, things are always much more difficult in China. Much, 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 much more difficult. So there are pros and cons to those kinds of arrangements. I think you don't enter China without a plan. You don't enter China without familiarizing yourself with the market. You don't enter China without a war chest. So you need to have clear goals in mind. And if you think you are able to enter the Chinese market and willing to cede some control over your, let's say, freedom to market that, or freedom to find other distribution partners in exchange for getting the support and the backing and the investment, if that fits your strategic goals, you can go for it. Because that also means not just your commitment, but the Chinese are also committed to you at that point. But the challenge there, and I think this is where you can go wrong, is that you don't really understand what you commit to, and you don't understand what you give away when you give them exclusivity on something. There might be better opportunities out there for you that suit you better. There might be a potential partner for you somewhere there who doesn't demand exclusivity on some things. There might be a partner who doesn't want to have a part of your IP, for example. So vetting potential partners is the place where you should really focus on hard, because the partnerships necessarily are not bad, but you need to be clear on what you're willing to give away and what you could be having in return. Does that answer your question, at least in part?
Partly. Yeah. They want to form JV with me because actually, because we're an education company. They keep saying that. So Chinese,
very hot in China.
Yeah. So basically, it's going to be more and more known to foreign brand. So the threat is imminently that you have to operate in China with a Chinese brand, and that's why the JV is going to be Chinese owned, and otherwise it doesn't go into Chinese school. And so then they want to seek the investment capital vehicle, which actually, from my humble opinion, I think is all correct. It makes perfect sense. But I have more problem to explain to get my British colleagues to accept that, because they say, wow, this is my thing. And yes, I think it's very hard to find sensible people like yourself who is experienced on China. Because trust me, it's a total minority. Most of the Westerners, and British included, and still looking at China, focusing on Uyghur problem, focusing on human rights, focusing on various human rights issues, and they don't really understand China as a very mature and powerful business entities. Notice what is entities, because Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hangzhou, and Chengdu, all these are actually very powerful individual business entities and with their substructures. And yeah, it's sometimes I found it's quite frustrating to communicate with other Europeans who are very headstrong, and they don't really respect this. Yeah, but yeah, thank you. Yeah,
no, it's all right. And if it's any consolation, I find that when you feel like an outsider at home and in China, because of the experiences you've had and maybe some of the understanding that you have, it also means that you're in an interesting place between two worlds. And that gives you the opportunity to do good things that not everybody can do, because you're in the interface, you're in the meeting point between two worlds. And it's a difficult place to be because of the constant feeling of being a bit of an outsider, and not everybody may be sharing the same experiences as you. Also gives you a lot of opportunities and I guess wisdom if you're really lucky. So that's the positive side of it. I feel it enriches my my life much more than it takes away from it.
we need a club to be formed for this kind of between people. I totally resonate with you. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
there's another question.
One more question from Easy.
right.
Then after that, I just noticed like, hey, Kiranda just arrived. So
Excellent.
one more question for Pia. Then we shall move on to next person.
So is it now
Yes,
my
Easy.
turn?
Yes,
Thank
Easy.
you.
Your turn.
So, yeah, I would like to ask Pia, from your profound experiences when communicating with your Chinese partner, how do Chinese relate to their peers' straightforward and honest replies? For example, when making business decisions with your Chinese partner, and if you happen to disagree with him or her, like, what's your suggestion how to approach, like, how do you deliver your reply to your Chinese partner? Do they prefer honest and straightforward reply, or something like more like, maybe I agree with you, but maybe I disagree with you a bit? Like, what do you find, what's the best, like, golden rule for approaching these kind of issues? Thank you.
Thanks. Another great question. I think the golden rule is to develop emotional intelligence, self-reflection, and communication skills in general. I find that, you know, I'm generalizing a lot with the Chinese, but they're also 1.4 billion individuals, and they all have their different sort of ways of communicating. So you can't always generalize a lot. So, you know, general advice is listen and learn, and maybe imitate some of the behaviors you observe around you to get your message across better. But for a specific situation, if I have a long-standing relationship with a Chinese partner or a coworker, I find we can be very direct, because the Chinese are, above all, they're practical. They're practical. They want to get things moving. So when we have achieved honesty and trust, we can often communicate quite directly, and I find that quite easy for me as a Finn. It's a relief. You have to be aware of the situation, though. So if you're privately having a chat with someone, or your very close team, your peers, for example, you're fine. But if somebody's boss is in the room, or if you're in a bigger meeting where, you know, collaboration is still being established, in the early stages, yeah, I wouldn't maybe challenge things outright. I would say, this is an interesting idea. We'll get on it. We'll get back to you. Or I would find a way to accommodate it at the time. And then as we work together, eventually it will also be in their interest that I'm able to tell them that, listen, this is something that's going to be challenging to make to work in the Nordics, for example, because of these reasons, because although your assumption is correct, the people there might not see it that way. So we need to find a way to maybe word this in a different way, or maybe take a little bit of a different approach to accommodate them so that your great idea can still move forward. So it's a lot about finding compromise, validating the other side, especially if they're at a risk of losing face. And then softly and slowly sort of instilling your wisdom and expertise into it. Because at least for me, when I deal with the Chinese, one of the reasons why I'm there is because I can work with both. And that is one of the assets I bring to the table, is that I can tell them what Westerners think and how they relate to China and what's difficult for them. So they also want to hear it to some extent. So also be aware of like where your contribution is, because that's something that you bring to the table and they expect that.
Great.
Hello,
Thank
can you hear me?
Hello, hey.
Hello,
Yes, we can.
you can. Is it good enough? I'm driving in the between over here, so my window is about 20 minutes for now. So I try to make it quick. Hello?
We can have a small break before that you have a comfortable place to have your speech.
No, because then after 20 minutes I don't have time anymore. So I have to do it while driving. So it's okay. Don't worry. That's the life in Korea. So we are also moving. I was listening to what's your name, Mia Kuosmanen's speaking that things happen fast, and it happened fast as well here. So I'm meeting one of the Busan. Busan is one of the cities in Korea, southern port city, and I'm meeting one of the richest man, and he said he wants to meet me. And now we have a break time. I said I should be there because I promised to be in another meeting. So I will be there, and I'm driving to the next place where he wants me to go. But I will first explain a little bit like Mia also what I did. So I was sent to Korea by Tamro. It was Tampella company in 1989 to deliver some drilling machines to find the North Korean infiltration tunnels. That was my first job. And the thing that I was put just as a novice in the middle of one agent that was already nominated and several other agents that were nominated for different fields, and I had to sort out their relations and make them to work together, or cancel some of them who didn't want to work together. So that was my experience when I started in 1989. And then I worked a couple of years with Tampella Tamrock, and then it was sold actually to Sandvik. Now it's a Swedish company, Sandvik. But in the meantime, I was going to work longer with them, but there was the Finland IMF or Finland financial crisis when Soviet Union broke up. And then Finland was in a very difficult situation. So actually I was laid off, but I was given the chance to be an agent for Tampella Tamrock for certain part in Korea. And I joined a Korean partner to make a dealership for the Sandvik Tamrock. But then the 97 financial crisis came up, and also everything break apart, or all business stopped, especially import from abroad to Korea, because exchange rate doubled. So it means the equipment prices also doubled at that time in 1997, right? End of 97. So there was no business anymore in the same way. So we had to find some new things to do. So we sold imported equipment back to the abroad, because once the exchange rate was double, you could get the price more than you had paid actually when they were new. So that happened then. And then in 2000, I was scouted to Partec, which also doesn't exist anymore. It became Partec or Cargotec, because Kone bought the Partec and then sold out the Valtra tractors and sold out the Valmet forest machines, and then merged to Cargotec, which is now a company that's merging with Kone Cranes actually this year. So it's another big company. And then Kone bought the Partec. I was also then became in charge of Kone Elevators in Korea, which is actually one of the biggest companies working in China these days. So I had a chance to visit the Chinese factory, and we tried to sell the Chinese products in Korea during that time, from produced in that factory. But that kind of failed apart. And now we come to the situation. Well, I will tell about that a little bit later. But about the history, then I ran the Cargotec operation here until end of January this year, 20 years, and I grow the operation from actually closing. They were planning to close the company because it was making losses, and I made it up to 50 million, almost 50 million euro company with good profitability for the last 10 years. So that was my work. So everything in that sense worked well. But now if we consider, when I see the companies who are there, looks like there is many who have been related to China. I don't know how many is related to Korea or who is interested about Korea. But then it depends which industry you actually plan to be, how you act with the people. Because I think in Korea, the history is very much similar like China. In some sense, there is a lot of similar 5,000 years history in Korea as well, because Korea is partly Chinese have the same roots as Koreans. So even China tried to say that they are the central. China actually means Tungo, which means the central state, so that everything around belongs to China. That's, I think, the basic thing, because the name is the central state. That's the mind of
That's the mindset.
China. But anyhow, so am I right?
No, that's exactly right. That's how they've been viewing the world for a really long time.
Yeah, right. So they consider them as a central state, but of course, then countries like Korea don't like that because they feel that, okay, we don't belong to China. Also, the Japan doesn't belong to China. So many Korean companies have been in China, but they have coming back from there crying out because they have not been doing that well. And of course, now the global situation is affecting to that, let's say, the American and maybe some part Europe as well. Well, Korea is in a difficult situation because it's also Korea's biggest trading partner at the moment. So, of course, the economic situation as such is very dependent on Korea, because Korea is exporting a lot to China. But anyhow, now we concentrate, the Finnish companies coming to Korea. So I think it depends which industry you are. And I was also working like Junction X, which is part of the same, like the Slash in some sense. That was organized 2 years ago in Korea. And that was also the well, I would say that it was organized as a volunteer team over here, and it had a lot of participants. So now, if depend on where you come to Korea, in what position, I think Korea is more easy in some sense because Koreans are more open than Chinese. Maybe they have been the similar, losing face and other, and of course, senior people still in official meeting, you may lose face and you may consider that. But if you are a newcomer, totally newcomer, of course, the easiest way is that you find somebody first who is related to your business or whatever. It may become your some connection. So normally they are very interested to help you in any case. But of course, then if you want to find an agent, which is the normal common way to start the work, is actually to have an agent. So if you get an agent, of course, then you can use some services like Business Finland or some consultant. But of course, the one way is also that you start with how to say, with somebody. But of course, it might be the wrong one. But also the very important part might be that might actually be that it really depends on your business size, and really depends on how fast you can get out. If you need the money by the partner who is actually having the money to invest in your product, or how big is. But now I see that here maybe the companies are more like startup and so on, and they would like to scale up. So they also may need money. Maybe you need a venture capital partner or somebody who invests in your company as well. So younger generation generally. I was actually going to talk about language. Now I am telling it a little bit later. But anyhow, the language as such. Young generation generally speak which in startup area, they speak English, but the language is English itself doesn't include the total culture itself. So when you are in business in a more conservative area, then like the cranes or cargo tech, there's nobody who speaks English. So it depends on which business area you are, in how easily you can get along with those the people or potential partners or customers or of course authority also, or authority, because in some case you need to be also involved with the authorities, with the government or the legal issues and so on. They are also quite weak in the language, so you need the Korean language normally there. Even these days, many authorities have published their homepages English also, but it's not covering everything, and the English sites are not updated regularly. But then other thing about the language, of course, the young generation generally speak English if they are in some of these sexy industries, which are like digital and some others. And in many cases, the written language is better than the spoken language because you don't learn. But these days, a lot of Korean younger generation, they study in US or Canada or Europe or England or so on. So the knowledge is quite good also spoken. But otherwise, for the local people here, even they study at school English, it is not really too common to know. The other thing for language is that I think a little bit similar, like in China, you said that Mia, that if you know the language and you know the culture as such, you can say things straight. But if you are a beginner, it's maybe more hard to say straight. But I would say that in Korea, it's more easy to say straight things if you are get along with the people. Of course, you have to have the, let's say, be able to see the face and be able to understand the body and face language of the people, so that you get to understanding whatever. So it's communication as such. But regarding language, the other thing is that if you are already having business and many companies want to, let's say, use SAP for their ERP system, that's fine. You can use the ERP, but every company in Korea needs to register to the tax authority, and all the tax invoices has to go to their system. But actually, then that system doesn't read the SAP even you put it in Korean language, your SAP. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way actually so easily. So many companies who have a global company who try to use SAP ERP, and then they actually cannot connect to the SAP from the tax office. You still need to have a second kind of system to approach that, and that's sometimes very hard to understand by the global company CEOs or the IT teams. They say, okay, Windows can work in the different languages. Yes, it can work, but if the Windows is not in original, if it is not in original the Korean Windows totally, then it doesn't connect to some of the systems over here, or you need actually to.
I think it's really great because I think we're getting a really genuine doing business in Asia experience with you. Like, I think this is how it looks in China as well. Very often, you're doing a million things at the same time.
Yeah, there is many people shouting on me at the moment, but don't worry, I have a few minutes to go. So what I wanted to say is that the language is an issue that on different stages you get better off if you know the language. But if you come to the country and if your industry is sexy, or you are in the digital area with the younger generation who are in the company, there are scale-up companies and venture capitalists, many of those you can manage in English, but still you don't get to the deep bottom of what you really might be able to do if you understand the Korean culture and Korean way of thinking in addition to language. So language itself is not everything. So you have to live in the country or live in the cultural way to be able to understand the thing. And the other thing that you also said that, okay, just having a meeting. It's normally not the main thing. So it's common to have company dinners in Korea between the members, but also between the others. So if you get well along, you learn to know the people. So there is many things that are similar like in China, but not everything. So in some sense, I feel that it's more open. But then on the other hand, in China, I understand women are more in decisive positions in China, but in Korea, it's still mostly men. So that is some other thing. In China, I can see in government organization and companies, women have a much stronger position in many areas, at least what I felt when I visited few times in China. But Korea is still very much the men who are in charge, but it's changing. But it's really now. If you have some questions, I think that what I wanted to tell, that language, culture, and the government policy. So, like a word, for instance, it works here, but all government offices use the Hangul word, which is kind of the local word processing tool. And if you have word documents, you cannot send them in. They don't accept, they cannot read them necessarily, or they are not willing to read. So you need to have the local one, the local software for the local language, even that you can write in English also. So that is one of the things that you cannot manage with the global things. Then you have WeChat in China, but we have Kakao Talk in India, and that's a little bit similar. But of course, Korea is not restricting the others. You can use WeChat or WhatsApp or any other thing. So it's not closed in that sense that you could not use. But the Koreans are not using those much, except few that are working with abroad. So once you are locally, if you come to Korea, of course, it would be good to have some partner or you work with somebody. Of course, in our area also, I run the chamber actually, or was in the chamber member. So maybe we can also help in the beginning a little bit. But generally, if you search in internet, also you can find a partner, or if you have very sexy or interesting offering, then people find you and they contact you. But always the first one is not necessarily the best one as a partner. So you have to be, in some sense, careful how much you promise. Well, I think that's briefly what I wanted to say. But now you could ask some question if you have.
So, is there any questions to Heikki Ranta about Korea?
Hello, Heikki. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for interesting information. I'm Vitaly, CEO from DeskMe, for a startup from Finland, and we're actually also considering Korea. And what would you recommend as a starting point for some startup, which is not a big company, obviously, which is super limited resources, and it's a software startup? So we have, for example, in our case, we have office or desk reservation app, and we have a really good traction right now because it's remote work and flexible office concept being popular. So it's actually, we have customers in 8 countries and including China and Japan. But I haven't actually approached at all Korea yet, but it's definitely super interesting. What would you suggest as the first step for software startup?
Well, of course, there is, you said reservation app or something. Of course, there is a lot of apps in Korea as well, a lot of development. Lot of development going on in Korea as well. So I think one of the ways to search the Korean app, actually your partner with somebody who works similar. Or the other thing, if you work in Korea, of course you have to localize your app, because I don't think it necessarily, if it's also supposed to work in Korea, it should be, I think, more localized. And the hotels, here is overflow of hotels. So actually people don't make reservations for hotel, for instance, too much, because you can enter hotels without reservation. It's a very common in the local country. So I never made a reservation in Korea for hotel, except for some foreigner, for some, because they feel like that. So I don't know, maybe the reservation is coming maybe at some stage, but so far I think in some sense, of course, new things are coming also. Uber also came here, but they had to go, I think they are a little bit here, but they had to go out because there is Korean app which is much more popular than Uber in Korea, for instance. So you have to be careful in this kind of, I think, software areas, because you need to consider also I'm not a specialist in software. It's just my feeling what I'm telling you now, because I have not been worked really with software, and I feel that's a dangerous area in some sense, because there is so many also local different area of developers, but also then you have language, and you have to consider that the culture fits or the need, that there is a need for that kind of app what you really are offering.
And by the way, a second follow-up question is, you mentioned about this entry through investors who could be like venture capitalists, for example.
There is also startup events in Korea, and they also look for foreigners to join, and that could be one of the way to try to join. So like this Junction X, there will be now in May a Junction X, which is kind of for startups to introduce. It's a little bit like more like, it's with the different inventions that you introduce over there. So that could be one of the things. It will be in the internet. So it's kind of, that could give some idea if somebody interested you to join the Junction X.
Okay, I'll definitely look it up. How does it normally work when they invest? Do they invest into local Korean entity? Or into like also into mother company?
It might be anything, of course, if it is interesting and you have the pitch is not only enough. Anyhow, somebody study and get interested of that. But of course, maybe in some cases also there is so many developers. Maybe they are interested. If you introduce the Korean system, then there is somebody who localize it get the idea just and use it a little bit differently to fit the local market. So, but of course, the thing I think is that you get in contact with, or you find out even from internet or apps. But there would be, of course, then good to understand the Korean to see what is similar that already exists here, and then see. But really, I would say that you should need to understand the local need if it is really suitable here or not. Somehow, but you could find through this kind of event somebody partner who would like to evaluate your software.
Right. I see. Thank you so much, Heikki. I really appreciate your feedback, your recommendation.
If you connect me, then I can introduce the Junction X that they will do. That could be it's a slash-related activity control, or actually introduced from Finland, and that could be something to get in connection with people who have startups in the software area.
Are you on LinkedIn or Facebook?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, for instance. Facebook, I am reading hardly. I have an account there, but I open it very seldom. Though LinkedIn, I open more often, so you can contact me from there.
Okay.
If you write Granta Korea, you can find me easily. There is no others.
Great thing. I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Now looks like my battery also going out. Anyhow,
Okay, Heikki, I could ask like a small thing from you. Like when you deal with people who don't have a lot of experience with Korea, what are the biggest challenges you have with them?
You mean the foreigners who doesn't know Korea?
The foreigners, yeah. What do you have to constantly explain them?
No, I think normally, I don't know. It depends on the industry. Sometimes they make things big and they think they can do things by themselves. And somebody can do if they find the right partner or they have somebody who supports them. And these days, there's a lot of exchange students in Korea who spend here, I think 200 exchange students who are already learning culture and language. And if they deal with here, they understand some of the realities, but not necessarily the business area or things. And of course, it depends who are the foreigner. If they never had to do with Korea, of course, they may be either thinking that, okay, we are the best in the world. If I go somewhere, everybody obey me or everybody bow for me. And that's a very dangerous thing. If you look like that, then Koreans won't like it. So you should not look through your nose downwards to the Korean. If you do that, then it will be... 여보세요? 예, 주차장에 도착했어요. 네, 알겠습니다. 네, 밥 받았어요. 예, 감사합니다. 네. 네. Okay. I think I should go soon, so... So I don't know if that helps you, but the main thing is you should not underestimate. You respect the Korean same as any other people, and then it's more easy to communicate. You show the respect, you get the respect. I would say that that's one of the key advice. I think it's the same maybe in all of the Asian countries as well, but a little bit different. Korea is more open in some sense, and you losing face in front of people is also difficult, actually. But if I worked in company as a CEO, among my management team, I wanted to show losing my face many times to make them to understand as well, to make things open, but it took time. It takes time. So in the beginning, when you are with new team, it's very hard to do it, or you should not necessarily try to do it. But if I work a company CEO and I was 20 years, in the years, I made them to understand open culture as well, and losing face is not a problem. So I encourage that and gave bonuses to people who lost their face, so that we can work more openly. But it doesn't work from very beginning, right?
Yeah,
Mia, you agree?
Right. It's Pia, by the way.
Pia, sorry, Pia.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I agree. And I think in Asian cultures in general, that's my experience. That's very true.
Yeah.
You have to be much more careful about being open in the beginning when you don't yet have the trust.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah. And you have a certain respect, and it's not only language. You bow the way, you give your name card certain way. But of course, foreigners are excused because if they don't know. But the key thing is you are excused if you respect the people. Whatever you do wrong, it's not so big problem if you respect them. So you are excused all of the things in Korea. But if you think that they are below people or something like that, that you don't get excused. That's never forgiven. So you respect the people and you do some mistake, it doesn't matter.
That's very true. And I think that's really great advice, like dealing with any human beings in general.
참배시라고. 잠깐만요. 여기 맞는다. 아니요. 좀 여기 이식단 여기 비식 1번가 어디지?
여기 신문가 이거 아파트니까 신문 여기 있어 여기.
여기 알겠습니다. 네. Okay. So yeah. So of course it helps to know the language, but also know the culture. Where is your limit? You learn that by time. So I don't go. I think the only advice I give you, you can excuse and forgive everything else if you respect the people. That's my advice. Respect the people and you get forward in Korea.
Can I ask you a fun question?
Sorry?
Can I ask you a fun question?
Yeah, why not?
Did you have to play golf with Koreans, and how did you find it?
Well, it depends. If you know to play golf, you can play golf. Yes, sure. I play golf even though I'm not a good golf player, because at the Chamber we organize 2 times a year golf. But for business, you don't necessarily need to play golf. You can always excuse. If you are not a golf player, you can do something else. But of course, golf is one way to learn to know people. It can be some other activity like mountain climbing is very common. We have a lot of mountains. So I went out to the mountain about 1,300 meters up this weekend. 5th was Children's Day actually. So I went up to the mountain with some people, but some is related to business, some is not, because I'm organizing ultra marathons. Actually, I'm running. Korea has a lot of runners. I'm marathon runners, maybe 20,000, and some are businessmen and others. So I'm running marathons. I just started 5 years ago. So I'm organizing in Finland an ultra marathon for 225 kilometers, taking the train to Kemijärvi, the most northern point you can go by train, and running from there to Helsinki. So I have taken more than 100 Koreans to there. So yes, you can play golf with those who like to play golf, but it's not 100% necessary to play golf. But those who play, if you play golf, that's fine. You get along. So anyhow, you have something to do yourself, or you show interest in something. Yes, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
So everybody can do business. I would say. So still the first thing, respect the Koreans, you will get respect back, and you can do it. Doesn't matter what your hobby is. You can do diving. There's a lot of divers here. There's a lot of runners here. There is a lot of mountain hikers here. There is golfers. There is tennis players. There is ice hockey players, not so many. But anyhow, this different field, and you have your hobby. Of course, if you have the same hobby, you can do maybe better. But it's yeah. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, you can connect me, and if you have something about Korea, yes, I try to give you the first advice if you have something, if you are interested in Korea more. So that's my advice. I cannot maybe.
Send your
I don't
LinkedIn
know all
already.
industry. I know quite many industries as such, but not everything. Software is a little bit. I feel that's quite. It might be good and it might be scalable if you do well. And the game companies like the Supercell has been really well doing here.
All right. Seems like any other question to Heikki Ranta? If not, anything more question for Pia? Something just came to your mind during this speaking event?
Okay. Anyhow, I should go. But if you have more questions, please contact me. I think LinkedIn you can find me by Heikki Ranta Korea, if that's okay.
Yes,
So thank you so much for inviting, and sorry to me, things happen to go up. I'm meeting the Busan, one of the richest guy is waiting for me, and he's calling for me, so I should call now.
Hey, kamsahamnida. Thanks, Heikki. Kiitos. It's nice meeting you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Yes. Seems any other questions?
Oh, Pia, I couldn't find you on LinkedIn. Do you not use LinkedIn, please?
Oh, yeah, I do. Hang on. I'll be very happy to. You guys can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I sent the message to the chat here or the link to my profile. If you have a question about China, I can help you like with a quick answer. But also like if you have somebody who's thinking about entering the Chinese market, then of course we will be happy to help with Mingle Advisors on a more extensive way as well. I'll be very happy to connect with you guys and have a chat. Yeah, and thanks guys at the Nordic Chinese Startup Forum. This has been really fun.
Right.
It's been fun for me. I don't know if it's been fun for you.
Yeah, it was fun. Right? We learned a lot of things. And before we heading out and finishing this event, so I would like to also remind we have another second pitch event. It's happening on June 3rd at 11 o'clock. And it will be showing on LinkedIn all the details. And that's about it. If you have any more question about us, NCSF, or overall, feel free, leave your message through LinkedIn, our LinkedIn group or Facebook group we have also. So it's finding like us in Nordic China Startup Forum.